Hey everyone, welcome back to Two Dads, One Controller. Today we are going back to where it all began. No Gungans, no clone troopers, no Death Star plans in limbo. We're talking about the original Star Wars trilogy, episodes 4, 5, and 6, A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Three movies that didn't just launch a franchise, they completely changed the movie industry and pop culture forever. We're going to do the same setup as before in our prequel episode. I'll set the table, throw out some big discussion points, and then we'll open it up for some classic Star Wars debates. So get your Tauntaun sleeping bags ready, and let's get into it.
Two dads playing late in the night. Video games, shine neon lights. Controlling world, saving the day. Superheroes come out to play.
All right, Star Wars A New Hope, Episode 4. So it's 1977. No one knew what Star Wars even was. And then A New Hope hit and changed everything. Here's kind of a point I want to tee up for us to start. I want to talk about the simplicity of the story. You have a young farm boy, ancient knight, space pirate. It's a classic hero's journey. Why do you think it resonated so hard with audiences back then and still does today?
Well, I think the reason why it resonated was A New Hope was obviously it's more of it's like a simple topic, not topic. It's a simple story, but had a lot of nuance to it when you really truly think about it. And this was like the first time where you saw like a story being developed and through the lens of like not just telling you the story, if that makes sense. Like some movies usually spell it out to you or whatnot, like talking to like the people watching the movie. But in like the Star Wars movies, especially in Empire Strike Back, they talked about it, so it felt a little more organic. Like the acting was different in Star Wars. Like back then, like movies were like look at not literally look at the screen and tell you what's going on, but like it's really a stark contrast difference with the way if you go back and watch any movies around this time, like they tell you what's going on as opposed to the characters talking to each other. So that was refreshing, and there's more like adult. What's the word I'm looking for? Adult themes going on in this movie. It's more than just like, oh, like I'm here to be the good guy. It's a lot, and I think that's like I think that's like the reason Star Wars really click with people. In terms of a simple way I can explain it.
I really think it's rooted in Luke's humble beginnings. I mean, I have not watched as many movies where the protagonist is so relatable in a way that it felt like watching A New Hope without any context from the other movies. It feels like Luke could be anyone. It's a classic hero's journey theme, but Luke being just a farm boy from a desert planet really drives home the thought in the audience members that anyone could be Luke, even you could be Luke. Um, and as the story progresses, we learn a little bit more how everything is more intertwined, but it's not so specific as the prequel trilogies where you're teeing up, Anakin is the chosen one, and from the minute we meet him, he's kind of destined for greatness. No, Luke is anybody, and I mean he does rise to eventual fame within the rebellion and throughout the OG trilogy, but it doesn't feel like at the start of that movie that Luke is somebody who is necessarily destined for this journey that he has been put on.
I think those are fair points, right? Like I think without having the context of the other films, especially in that time, it's a space odyssey, right? Like it's such a, and I know there were some space movies back then, but it was just such a new and refreshing take on a story, and just visually which is what I want to get into next, is just the visual effects, right? So Industrial Light and Magic was literally create a new technology for this movie. So how important was the look and feel of the ships, the worlds, and the practical effects in making Star Wars believable? What part did that
I'd
play?
love to just start with the practical effects aspect. I mean, Star Wars is nothing without its miniatures, and I mean, from the first episode to even what we watch now, even if it's a little bit more muted than it once was, it's just really impressive from a filmmaking standpoint to be able to pull off that scale without CGI. And just the worlds that they were able to create in general. It's kind of and I don't have as much context as the movie industry as a whole, but watching other movies around that time frame, it kind of seems like a gateway into not modern filmmaking, but at least new age sci-fi for the time.
Yeah, and like the cause space genre, so space genre, people usually just chalk it up to space battles, and space chases, stuff of that nature. But Star Wars is more along the lines of this is a believable world. You know, people have their own agendas. Not everyone's necessarily good or bad or something. It's like it was never always cut out like black and white. Like for example, uh, what made it so believable was that Han Solo is not a hero. He just happened to be a part, of he just happened to do something that is considered a hero act. He didn't do it because he wants to save the galaxy. He did it because he was in love with Leia, and he had a friend. Became a friend of Luke. So, like Star Wars, it's like it's it's different because it's literally at least even at least to the time there was no movie like it. It was always good guys, bad guys. Well, yes, Han Solo's a good guy, but not really. He's a smuggler. He just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and he was like, "Damn, I'm really in love with this lady." So I think that's what made Star Wars b- believable because it's a world like there's aliens and stuff just going about their day. They're not even like aliens that are like trying to eat stuff and like ultra aggressive for no reason. Like no, it's literally just people going about their days and trying to get to the next day. So, and I think that's what I liked about whenever I first started watching Star Wars.
So
Like it
then,
was
with that, let's get into like the characters themselves, right? With Luke, Leia, Han, Vader, Obi-Wan. What were some first impressions you think people had back then, and then how did they hold up today as characters?
I feel like the character that they set up to be the most similar, I guess, in terms of storytelling throughout a series that has had many different forms of media release in many different time frames is Darth Vader. I mean, from the first scene in the film, he's him and his soldiers are blasting his way onto Leia's spacecraft, brutally murdering rebels. A couple scenes later, blowing up entire planets, and I just think that they created Darth Vader in an image that has been sustained throughout the entirety of the series of Star Wars. Like a lot of characters, like Han Solo, has a little bit of a redemption arc. Um, Leia becomes a little bit more. I mean, she's always been outspoken, but really like becomes a leader of the rebellion throughout many different stages of rebellion. But Darth Vader is Darth Vader, and he's always been Darth Vader from the second that he blasted onto Leia's ship, and every resulting form of media that's followed.
I would say,
I
I mean,
agree.
let's dive more into Darth Vader, right? Because he's still kind of considered one of the most iconic villains of all time. And I know in the design they gave him more like he does have a samurai look to him, like in the foundation of his design. What are some? Would you make any changes to his design or his character or anything, or do you think he is when you think of a true cinematic villain, that's Darth Vader is
You
what
can't
comes to
you
mind.
can't mess with perfection.
Yeah.
The only noticeable change that they made with Darth Vader was, I believe, in the original um, filming, and I don't think it even made its way onto the original release. But they did have James Earl Jones as the original voice actor. And seeing some of those, I can't even. I wish I was able to credit him, but I cannot remember the name of the person who was doing all of the lines at the time of recording. But even hearing, it was some like, I don't want to say whimsical, but just some like Britishy voice, and I couldn't imagine Darth Vader without James Earl Jones' iconic voice. But there's nothing that I would personally change about Darth Vader. Perry, is there anything that you would change?
Not really, no. It's something about, the like every honestly, it's you can talk to any person who hasn't ever even cared about Star Wars, and if you play like the breathing noise, they will instantly know who it is. Like that's how iconic Darth Vader is almost like pop culture to this point. Um, I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't change anything about Han Solo. Either like Harrison Ford killed the role, Carrie Fisher did a great job as Princess Leia. So like I think it is perfect in a way. My only, if I was to try to find any kind of critique about Darth Vader, and this is me like truly, truly, truly nitpicking, is maybe I don't honestly I can't. Nah, I have no idea. I'm trying to find a nitpick, but I don't have anything because it's literally like a 10 out of 10.
I wish that for Vader, and this isn't really a nitpick at the character itself, but more just the translation of the character. I wish that they really showed more of what he can do, like what power I know they're very limited back then, but like what's developed from it as far as the comics, like him hunting Jedi and some of the legendary battles he's had, like these cataclysmic battles with these Jedi masters over the years. I just wish one of those would like translate to screen. They hinted a little bit of like what he could do in the Obi-Wan series, uh, but I just wish that this is not just an original trilogy. Just it's just all of Star Wars. I wish they would like put what Vader could do more on the forefront.
Yeah, and he had his moment in spoiler alert in Rogue One. But even then it was pretty brief. I think it reminds me of a panel of a comic. I can't remember which comic it was. Where Darth Vader is surrounded by a battalion of rebel forces, and I think it goes something like where the rebel forces say, "We have you surrounded," and Darth Vader says, "All I'm surrounded by is fear and dead men," and of course they die. But yeah, he is an all-powerful being in the Star Wars universe, and it is a shame that doesn't get tapped into more.
So with that, let's transition to the kind of last part of this movie, the famous third act, the Death Star trench run, which was the climax of the movie. Still one of the best third acts in cinema history. What are y'all's thoughts on it? First time seeing it, what did you think?
I thought it was
I have
sick.
no idea how they made that in. I would say 1977, but I guess earlier than that. I mean, again, it kind of goes back to how miniatures are the backbone of Star Wars. But as someone who saw it much later than its original release date, it was it was amazing, and I just am trying to put myself into the shoes and the seats of somebody seeing it for the first time in its first release, and it was very. I would have to imagine it was very revolutionary for its time. Just being able to show something like that on screen so seamlessly, and it's perfect. I mean, you have this feeling that good will prevail, good being, the rebel forces, but you never truly feel comfortable with the fact that you think that they're going to win until the bomb goes down that one narrow shaft. So Yeah, I agree with you. I do think it's one of the best third acts of all time.
I think we, as like our, generations between the three of us, I think we were spoiled in the sense that we've always pretty much grown up with effects that are these like big cinematic CGI set pieces. As far as we were, old enough to start going to those types of movies. So I just can't even imagine back then where this. I feel like this just didn't come close. Like I'm sure there were some movies because back then they used to use. It was very perspective based of how they would do certain scenes. Like if they had, instead of a green screen, they would put like a clear, like painted like silhouette of a city and then use perspective to make you seem giant over the city, like crushing the city, or like miniatures like you said, or whatever. So you would have these like little pieces of other movies where I feel like this Star Wars movie was throughout a kept one upping itself throughout the movie.
Yeah. Um, I really think also like the sound direction in the movie really sold it. Like the TIE fighters iconic screeching, the way the X-wings and the like just the cannons and stuff sound. It was very interesting. I think they did a great job with the sound direction as well. Something that's not really necessarily talked about a lot. I think I'm a huge sound guy, and I think sound in this in the series in general really carried a lot of weight of making things believable and stuff of that nature because no one ever really know what like a laser beam or like a ion cannon sounds like, but like Star Wars really kind of like paint it in a believable way. I truly enjoyed it. And then the trench runner was really sick seeing Darth Vader and his boys come running through just taking people out. It's interesting that they went with a trench run. I always wondered like what if it wasn't a trench, but it makes sense like why it is, especially after Rogue One. You kind of understand that the person who designed it, they flawed it on purpose and stuff like that. So thought that was great. Great little
Yeah, and
tidbit.
I feel like the end of that trench run gives you, I want to say, almost the only goofy Darth Vader moment of the entire trilogy, where you have him getting blown back and kind of the wobbly way that his TIE fighter just disappears into nothing, almost like he's part of Team Rocket. But I
Yeah,
just think it's a little bit of a funny way to end that part of the story for him.
So with that,
yeah.
let's transition into Empire Strikes Back episode 5.
I love the Empire Strikes Back. It's my favorite one of the but
All right.
of both.
That's the right answer.
Now we're moving into 1980, and Lucas is swinging for the fences with this one. Empire Strikes Back is often called the greatest sequel ever made. So to set the stage, let's talk about the tonal shift between 4 and 5, where the Empire gets way darker, way faster. Did that tonal shift surprise you the first time you saw it, and was it the right move for the trilogy?
It was the perfect move for the trilogy because I think what the movie was kind of almost righting its wrongs and from the first movie. Not to say the first movie did it badly or anything, but for example, you know, stormtroopers actually meant something and Empire Strikes Back. It wasn't like this like these I never understood why they always made it to where like stormtroopers are like just these horrible, guys that can't shoot, for for whatever reason. But they kind of wrote that wrong in there. And it also what I really really liked about Empire Strikes Back is the it showed that even though they've won a major battle, they're still at a huge disadvantage, like technology, logistically, and manpowerly. It shows that, like, you know, this is not just a sprint. This is a marathon. Like, this has to keep going, and we have to find ways to continue the momentum to beat the Empire, because a lot of people don't realize the Empire wasn't just like, obviously they're evil in a sense of that they're a dictator power, but to a lot of planets and to a lot of people, the Empire was just a police force. So when you have a normal police force, you are able to just recruit people, and there's normal people on this, there's normal people in the Empire that are just doing a job. So they don't necessarily see what they're doing as fascists, they're just doing a job. But whenever they lost that war and when the Death Star got blown up, that truly gave them motivation into their cause. Like they were like, "Yo, what the hell?" Like the rebels are looked at as bad guys, and to some planets and to some galaxies, they kind of do fit that. And so whenever they did this strike back, this fight on planet Hoth, like they had a lot of motivation for that fight. And it shows like they really, really, really took it to the rebels in that fight. Um, I truly liked it because also at the beginning of that show, not a lot of shows took the time to just show you like what people are doing on their downtime. Like it is like it's something about it. It's great to see people just going about their normal day and just doing routine stuff because it makes the place feel believable. I went on a little bit of a tangent there, just truly because I like this show. I'm sorry.
No, no, nothing to apologize for. I think, kind of building off of that, one thing that this episode does really well is it is kind of a equal and opposite reaction to the episode before it. So, in episode 4, where we feel like we're kind of building up to this major victory, episode 5, from the second that you open on Hoth, it really does feel like the rebels are on the run, and there isn't a point in the movie, personally, where I can breathe a sigh of relief and be like, oh, we're starting to get some traction. No, every single part of this movie feels like you're digging into a further and further hole, and even the small wins, you're looking over your shoulder wondering, how is this going to backfire in the next scene? And I think it would have been really easy to build off that victory and just show a story of a rebellion that just keeps growing and growing in force. But I don't think that that would have been very advantageous for the story, and I don't think it would have been very interesting for the viewer. I think that this deviation from the momentum that the rebels had gained really did show, like Perry was saying, like all of the trials and tribulations to come, and the fact that they are a very small faction battling against, an entire empire of soldiers.
With that, I want to look at characters, but more so their development, because I think this is where everyone starts to hit their stride and you kind of see far off where their roads might lead. So Luke training with Yoda, Han and Leia's relationship, Vader becoming something much scarier than just the bad guy. How well do you think the film deepened these characters?
I
I
think it,
think the film does the most for Han and Leia. Luke has kind of been set on this hero's journey path, like I said before, and it's a very straightforward path. I don't think that his journey necessarily deviates from the standard vision you would have for a hero's journey, but I think that they do a really good job of hitting all of those checkpoints and hitting them well. I think the wild cards really are Leia and Han, and just seeing their relationship um, evolve together, and seeing that Han, even though he is fighting for a cause, he still has his motivations all up until the end of the episode, I would say. But they do a really good job of just showing that kind of struggle internally for Han between doing what's right and doing what he would want to do. I mean, if you remember at the start of that episode, he's kind of like, I'm leaving. This rebellion's been nice, but I gotta continue doing my thing. And then as things devolve on Hoth, he sort of has a change of heart and a change of direction. But I really do think the story does a lot for progressing those two characters in general.
I'm completely on board. I love Lando Calrissian. Um, he kind of, I just loved his whole entire character in general. Me personally, but to kind of go off on Han and Princess Leia, they really were like the essentially the backbone of the Empire Strikes Back. You add in Boba Fett, and then you show the scene of Darth Vader capturing and torturing Han Solo. It made you, it kind of made you question, like, is this it for Han Solo? Almost like, will he make it in some way, shape, or form? You start to, especially at the beginning of the scene, in the hangar scene, you kind of start to see Princess Leia kind of take her stride as like kind of like a rebellion general almost, or de facto leader. Um, this might be a hot take. Me personally, I always thought like, well, like I always thought she was like a second leader in my opinion, Princess Leia in certain ways. I always I always thought of Mon Mothma, the main leader of the rebellion, and then Princess Leia was like the emotional leader. But you start to see it, like you see her debriefing, kind of taking this leadership role, and Han Solo's kind of like, man, should I even be here? Like, I've done more than you know, I should have done, and that's a very human reaction. The Empire Strike Back was an extremely human movie because especially after fighting, and destroying the Death Star, like any normal person would kind of be like, man, like how long is my luck gonna continue? Like should I just win, leave while I'm on top, or should I leave now before it gets worse? And I think it's a great movie. It really develops characters. You see more of Yoda, and it's hand in hand a great movie. And then also you get to see Boba Fett, and everyone loves Boba Fett, considering he had a very, very, I'm not gonna say minute role, but it wasn't like this
It was,
marquee role.
yeah, it was
But
brief.
yeah,
Yeah,
but everyone loved him. So I loved him
I
too.
do feel like I feel like Star Wars is a little notorious for having these really mysterious, awesome, stands out of the crowd sort of characters that they just don't really develop into. You see it with Boba Fett, you see it with his dad, you see it with Darth Maul, and even like Captain Phasma in the sequels. But Star Wars loves their mysterious characters that they refuse to give a backstory to. Um,
and that's the thing with me. That's the like less is more, mentality. Like you don't need to shove it down our throat to show that this is an awesome character or something like that.
yeah, and talking about less is more. You kind of touched on this a little, but Yoda's character to me is very interesting. Seeing Yoda in this movie versus seeing him in the prequels, it's pretty night and day. I know that this probably wasn't the original intention for the character because there wasn't really a whole Star Wars universe mapped out at the time. But it almost seems like he's devolving into madness a little bit. I mean, a man that has failed his entire order, has failed basically all the citizens of the galaxy, and is just hidden away in the swampiest corner of the galaxy and doesn't even own up to the fact that he once was a powerful and knowledgeable Jedi Master. I mean, we finally get there and see him training Luke, but even then, it's kind of it doesn't ever seem like he was super jazzed about it, and then he just passes away. It's an interesting story arc for a character who's pretty prolific in the Star Wars story in general, but just based off of that movie, I'm, and I can only say this speculatively, but I'm curious to what the fan opinion of Yoda was at the time with that small context.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that. But like when now that you bring it up, now like it's like, oh yeah, you know what, it's right. Uh, one thing I do like in The Empire Strikes Back, he's Admiral Pyatt. I think that's how you say his name. I can't remember how to say it, but the admiral for the Empire, he was kind of going through like his own internal struggle with Darth Vader and trying to serve Darth Vader. I thought it was really cool, you know, because like I said, the Empire is a police force, and 90% of the people that is working there, like they believe in what they're doing. But it was even to a point where Admiral Pyatt, he was kind of like, you know what, like, is this okay? You know, like, am I gonna be next? Am I gonna get choked out? Like, am I? So it was kind of interesting to see him kind of struggle himself because they showed like the Empire, you know, having their own issues and stuff of that nature, and I just thought that was really nice. Like, you know, just because they're just this giant force doesn't mean they always got their stuff together as well. Like they're trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm with you, and I feel like we haven't even gotten into the fact that George Lucas does use Star Wars as a vessel for political commentary, and at the time, you know, in the middle of the Cold War, a very tumultuous time across the globe, but I can definitely understand from George Lucas's American perspective the the overwhelming, I guess, how do I put this into perspective? Just like looking out at some big entity being like the USSR and
mhm.
seeing just kind of like the shroud that they had kind of put over their culture and how it was perceived from the outside, and just how he used that and kind of reflected it in his own story. Not saying that it's a one for one comparison, but
Yeah,
certainly a commentary on what was going on at the time.
most stuff.
With the major reveals of the movie, I wanted to get into Luke, I am your father. No spoilers needed now, but back then, an absolute game changer. How did that twist change the entire way we view the story?
I
Um,
think it puts it all into perspective. When we're starting the story in episode four, Luke is, like I said, just a simple farm boy. It could have been any of us, but you're kind of seeing the web being being strung at that point, and really being able to connect all of the characters. Whereas in the first episode, it's just a rebellion versus a empire in a very simple sense. But now you're seeing, you know, all these through lines and why certain people are connected to the story, and just the bond that the Force has between these characters. I feel like it does as much for the characters of Luke and Darth Vader in a storytelling perspective as it does for the Force in general, and just kind of the first um, the first breadcrumbs of the notion that the Force is something that connects all living beings, and just how there is kind of that invisible string in a sense.
yeah, I think. Never mind. I was gonna say something else on that, but never
We
mind.
we can always dive back into
I'll
it.
add a little bit of a fun little tidbit. I think that reveal was shocking for everyone except for, I can't remember if it's the Dutch or Sweden, where Vader does mean father, and I don't know if that was intentional by George Lucas or not,
I
but
think it was
I would
German,
think
where German Vader means father.
something, yeah, something like that. But I think it's kind of funny where the rest of the world is pretty shocked, and there's just one country that's like, well, his name is Darth
Checks out.
Father, so it's probably somebody's.
Checks
It's
out.
it's Dutch. It's Dutch. You're right, Hunter.
Um, One thing about the whole Luke, I'm your father scene, not really scene, but just the whole entire notion was that like it kind of puts it into perspective that anyone can fall to the dark side, and it's not like this because the dark side isn't just because you're bad necessarily, but like it's usually you show emotion, and like for example, Anakin. he used to fight with his emotions, which is a very human thing to do. You know, like if you lose someone that you love, you have rage. You know, it's just natural, and that's why like the Jedi Order was so unnatural, and that's why it failed in ways because they tried to suppress that emotion, and the dark side just kind of helps. What's the word? Empower your emotions. Like today, nowadays, like that's like a very normal thing to do. Is to be emotionally driven, to be emotionally intelligent. So the dark side isn't this radical thing of, oh, we need you to just kill everyone. It's very planned out, and is very direct. I can't think of the word right now that it's eluding me, but it can be anyone. Like you can easily find yourself falling to the dark side if you are going through like an emotionally challenging moment, and these people are like, "Hey, we get you. Like, we need to eradicate people like this from this, this world or this galaxy. We can make right by controlling X, Y, and Z and making sure these things don't happen." And that's why like the dark side is very, very, very like what's the word I'm looking for? It's what's the word when you want it, like, or it's
Like alluring.
intriguing to you. Maybe, man. But that's like that's why I like the Luke I'm your father scene, because it gave Luke like this reflection, like, maybe I'm going at this the wrong way, which eventually he it leads up to him not fighting, because he doesn't want to submit to the ways of the dark side, or he wants to fight it his own way by showing that you don't need to be fighting.
I
But
agree. And I mean, outside of the impact that that has on the plot, I think culturally, you could hone in on that moment specifically as the kind of like the moment that Star Wars gets put into the zeitgeist at the time. I can't think of a scene from Star Wars that has been spoofed, alluded to, and just referenced more in media. It's kind of like the Akira like motorcycle slide of line deliveries, but I think it did as much for the plot of Star Wars as it does for the cultural impact of Star Wars.
I like what you did there with the Akira motorcycle slide.
Can't yeah,
Culture
got a
individual.
name drop.
Culture individual. Um, but no, like I totally agree. I'm I just
This episode's letter is O.
it was such a perfectly timed line too. Like it wasn't long and drawn out. It was just like, Luke, I'm your father, man. I'm just like, what?
Never,
You know?
I never doubt James Earl Jones' ability to deliver.
And to round
Yeah.
out episode 5, lastly, Battle of Hoth and Cloud City. Two iconic settings. Which one stands out more to you? Real quick, let's get into this.
So standout is like, I don't. So I think most popular, I would obviously say Hoth. To me, Cloud City stands out like tenfolds in terms of like curiosity, like how does this place work? Like I
I
think
agree
Cloud
with
City.
that. I don't think that's a hot
Um,
take.
I'm not gonna say hot take, but like it's just more of like a. I'm not sure what you mean by standout, but I know, for example, like Hoth is super popular, and and it is kind of curious. Like, man, this is a frozen tundra. Like, why here? Type stuff. But Cloud City to me was just. I thought it was just beautiful. Like the
And
colors, the idea of living on a gas planet. Like, I thought Cloud City was interesting in so many different ways.
I'm going to take the opposite stance, where I think the Battle of Hoth is a more entertaining battle, but Cloud City does more for the plot. You're introduced. It's all about the scale of everything. Like, and in Hoth, you're introduced to these huge mechanized walking tanks, new starships, new troops, and all of that, and new combat methods with the kind of like lasso wrangling of the AT-ATs. And I think as an opening battle, it just perfectly encapsulates the lack of hope, I would say, that the rebellion is facing as they are pushed out of their current base by forces that are much stronger than them. But as far as scenes go, Cloud City does so much more for all the characters. I mean, you have even like the tumultuous journey of C-3PO and R2-D2 as they get resorted and reorganized throughout Cloud City and trying to like find their way back to Han and Leia, and you have the betrayal of Lando, which is kind of they kind of set it up from the second that you meet him, but in another way, you're kind of hoping that you're wrong in your intuition. And then just obviously the iconic scenes of Luke battling Darth Vader and Han Solo turning into carbonite, which seems terrifying, by the way.
It's horrible.
But yeah, but certainly Cloud City does much more for the plot. But I think in a first impression sort of way, I think Hoth is a little bit more exciting.
You kind of took it on that one. I don't really know what I can add. Uh, I think Cloud City also shows this shows that, how can I put it? Mm, man, for context, people, I like woke up like maybe 20 minutes ago, so
I feel
words
like
are
Cloud
really.
City just shows what Star Wars can be, like what that galaxy can hold, as far as like sparking your curiosity of how things are the way they are. At least my interpretation. Like I've got the image in my head of Cloud City for the first time. You're like, that's cool. How does that work? How does that, as a society, function? I think it
Yeah, it
just
really starts to like.
it
Oh,
unlocks
sorry.
your
Well,
curiosity. That's all I'm saying.
I think it kind of blurs the line between sci-fi and fantasy in a way. And I think an unsung hero of this episode is just the world building, where we're pretty set in our ways for the settings of the first episode, and they're very ingrained in sci-fi, but I don't think that they're very unique. We get a lot of interesting and unique worlds in episode 5, and Cloud City obviously being the most unique and most interesting of all of those new worlds that we get to explore.
Yeah. And what's funny was I don't I'm not sure if it was like super intended, but like in the original version of Cloud City, it almost kind of like had like a very pink kind of like filtering, like really pink. And then in the new edit, it's like a re-edit special edition of the Star Wars in Cloud City, and that, if I remember, it was like it wasn't as pink. Like, I know this is like super super nitpicky, but it was something about it that like the whole like pink cloud, like the pinkish tint was super interesting to me. It was like, oh, like why is this like super pink, and like why, like why everything is the way it is, like is there like a specific reason why they chose this planet in particular? It was something that like whenever when I was younger, I used to always think about.
So with that, let's start on Return of the Jedi. So episode 6, 1983, final chapter. For now, at least. I mean, no one knows where this franchise was going to go at the time. So here's what I want to throw on the table: the redemption of Darth Vader. Did it feel earned? How do you feel about Vader's arc when you step back and look at all three movies together?
It doesn't feel super earned in the scope of the trilogy. Um, the redemption of Vader almost seems like Luke completing his quest of becoming like a fully enlightened Jedi, but without the additional context of the prequels and the Clone Wars and even like Rebels, it doesn't feel super earned. It feels more like it feels like a regression to the mean almost within his own feeling. But I mean, Darth Vader for 2.5 episodes is really pounding the dark side table, and being a outspoken advocate for joining the dark side. And in the very last seconds of what could be Luke's life, turns back to the light, which now we, as an audience who has all of the Star Wars media, can look at as a fully realized redemption arc. But at the time, I would think it almost seemed a little rushed. And I hate to say that um, as a critique of something that I love so much, but I don't think that within the reigns of the trilogy that it was a very actualized redemption arc.
So yeah, and I do agree with you because they never so originally they never showed the because there was like a lot of tension between Darth Vader and Palpatine. If anyone ever goes and read like little comics here and there or legend books, there was like a astronomical level of tension. Like they did not like each other, and sadly, like when you if you was to just watch the three movies, it'd just be like, well, I kind of like I guess you kind of leave this movie with the feeling of like, okay, I guess. But when there's so many like novels and movies and extra information, it like now to me is like, oh, that kind of makes sense. Like it makes sense. Like why he would. But then there's also another part of me that's like, they never really showed any of this. Like you have to genuinely go out of your way to read other books. And whenever he started, pounding on his kid with the Force, Palpatine, and it made sense why like Darth Vader snapped because there was already a lot of tension there, but the movies never really showed it. It never showed him like arguing with Palpatine, Lord Sidious. So it's a hard one for me. Like it it kind of feels like a little of a cop out of a way to go, but also another part of me that's like, reading all the extra stuff. It's like, okay, makes sense. But yeah, I wish they showed more of them arguing, especially like show more of like Darth Vader, like he couldn't stand Boba Fett. If everything Boba Fett stood for, he hated bounty hunters, but he worked with Boba Fett. There's a couple interesting things with that, but yeah, I agree with you there, Hunter.
For Luke's final confrontation with Vader and the Emperor is probably easily one of the most emotional and powerful moments of the saga. Do you think it sticks the landing for the whole trilogy?
Mm.
Absolutely. Harry, do you want to take this?
I could. So I think personally, I think it does stick the landing because how can I'm trying to like. I think it sticks the landing morally because it's like the perfect build up to the entirety of the movie. Especially when Luke's trying not to fight and everything of that nature, and then Palpatine decides he's just like, you know what, I'm just gonna zap you up. It was like emotionally driven because at least at the time, whenever I was a kid and when I was younger watching it, I truly thought this was the end for Luke. Like I didn't see Han Solo coming to save the day. Like I was thinking like Luke was gonna go in there and just de facto win, but that wasn't the case. I think the ending and then that final confrontation really held up, and it was a very ominous like a ominous setting. There wasn't really a lot of music going on, and like I said, sound direction it can really help you out and make the movie a lot better than what it is. Like there wasn't much going on whenever Luke first walked in, and I thought this was like, all right, is he going to live or is he going to die? Is he going to win? So I think it was a great scene, and to see Darth Vader right next to Palpatine, it was like it's not too often where you see that in terms of a fight's about to go down. So this was like a really good grand finale to Return of the Jedi.
And I think one thing that is really ingrained in the viewer is that I don't think it's really conveyed that Luke would ever fall to the dark side. It really feels like he's either going to prevail or die. And I think they do a really good job of that just throughout the series. All the temptation that Luke has faced gets brushed away pretty quickly, where you're not really seeing that internal struggle between light and dark in him. It's more like his journey to becoming like a fully actualized Jedi of the light side. And I mean, there's a lot of cool symbolism along the way. I think one thing that gets pointed out very often is how throughout the episode, Luke has a new look. He has a new lightsaber, and part of the new look is his black robes and his little like his black boots and all of that. And you're thinking, as an audience member, oh, is this alluding to maybe him falling to the dark side? But then in his final battle, his jacket or whatever it is kind of pops open, showing the light inside. And then you realize that there was never really it was never really a question of if Luke was going to fall to the dark side. It's a question of if he will prevail in his quest or not. And I think that that is a really interesting way to go about the character as a whole. It could have been really easy to write like an internal struggle sort of story, but instead they're writing a story of just, like I said, actualization, a very like through line there instead of like conflicting values.
Yeah, and it was at one point I remember like you could see the fear in Luke's face in that final bite. I said bite in that final fight with Darth Vader. Um, he was really going through it in that scene, and then when he finally like kind of bests Darth Vader in the duel, you know, Lord Palpatine was like, you know what? I'm about to just zap you. You know, like you're not gonna fall for the dark side, then so be it. And Palpatine's like a master manipulator, so it was it was a very tense scene. I'm not gonna lie, and like it really showed how like strong, uh, like being a father to and seeing your kid getting essentially smoked. It shows like even in this galaxy and in this world, like there's still the fatherly love that it exists somewhere in everybody to some point, to some extent.
All right, then for let's see one more thing to hit on for episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Endor
I felt
and the Ewoks. It was a divisive topic. Some love them. Some think it turned the final battle into a teddy bear warfare. How did you feel about the Ewoks?
Oh my gosh. Uh, so I don't like the Ewoks. I never cared for them. Like it was just too goofy in a way. The only saving grace that fight had for me was that it was kind of believable because it showed like how like okay that makes sense why they use this, like the Empire, like the ATST's getting crushed by the logs. That makes sense, I could see that happening. But like stormtroopers just getting knocked out from rocks being slinged to them and they're wearing armor, and I was like, all right, that's a bit of a stretch. um and like apparently like canon wise, like Ewoks are generally terrifying, or like they're vicious creatures, but it wasn't really portrayed that way in the show, so it was just kind of like oh, it was a mixed bag. Like there was a lot I love. Like I love the speeder bikes scene, but the Ewoks, even now, it was just kind of like it's almost meme-ish in a way.
See, and I take the opposite stance. Well, I agree with what you're saying. I think Ewoks are iconic, and it kind of goes back to what makes Star Wars Star Wars. Like imagine similar scenes, take away all the primitive technology, but it's just two boring factions of human soldiers. It's a pretty basic battle, and we've seen it, 1,000 times. But I think that's part of what makes Star Wars is kind of like the whimsical silliness that you never totally you never totally turn to, but you never absolutely lose. What makes Star Wars to me is there's always going to be some silly aspect, and there's always going to be some creatures that maybe aren't the most serious,
Yeah.
but it makes it so iconically Star Wars. And I do think at the end of the day, something that Star Wars does really great is never taking itself too seriously. And I do think that that is kind of like a microcosm of that theme that really does make Star Wars Star Wars. And I feel like I've said that 4 times now. But
Like,
but I
to
can't
me,
think of that final battle without the Ewoks. And even for all of their silliness and their shortcomings, I do think that it is a great way to distinguish what you're viewing on the
yeah,
screen.
that's true. I don't know. Like, to me, I think Star Wars is at its best when it takes itself seriously. Like Rogue One and like Andor. Like, I think Andor was like the best thing that's ever came out for Star Wars. And that's my it like
But
the
even
Shakespeare
in
level writing
Rogue
and
One and
everything.
Andor,
Huh?
even in Rogue One and Andor, you have that silliness.
You do.
What is Rogue One without K2SO?
That's true. That I'm saying, like, but in the grand scheme, like the entirety, like the tone of Andor versus most of other films, like I think Andor is like a gigantuan standout compared to the others. I think it was like perfect
Oh
and
yeah,
like
top three at least.
so. I don't know. Like I personally think Star Wars at its best when it takes itself seriously. I like small tidbits here and there, but like for me, the Ewok fight was just kind of like, man, this is how, this is how Ewoks, and I get it, but this is how, like, oh, come on, man.
I feel like, but I also feel like it kind of builds into the theme that like any one or any creature can have a huge difference because it's like in the grand scheme of things, do you think that like in the galaxy of Star Wars that they would have believed that a small faction of rebels and basically, cannibal teddy bears were going to take down the Empire? But I think it kind of shows the scale and almost the theme that like anyone can make a difference, and just because you aren't the most advanced or the most well equipped or maybe even the most intelligent, you are still able to impact as long as you're fighting for what you believe in.
That's true. I think that's true. I felt like it was more of a it. I think the Empire's biggest failure was its own hubris. The Empire was so full of itself that it never took anyone super serious unless you were like a Jedi or organization like the Rebellion. Like if you weren't one of those two, they didn't genuinely too muchly care about you because they just like, all right, we will just own you anyway. And the Ewoks were kind of owned before the movie showed up there. Like the Ewoks, like they never really showed it, but the Empire had AT-ATs there. They had a whole base, like multiple bases, and it just kind of sucks that like I don't know. I felt like they could have did the final fight and the Rise of Jedi differently, like the final whole entire shindig, but it is what it is, and I still love it for what it is. That's
And I
the
will say
only
one
critique.
final comment. I just love when the power of friendship prevails, and I really think that's a good, we use the power of friendship type of moment.
Yeah.
I want to do a little bit before I get into our last serious topic, and we're going to go quick through these. We're going to do a rapid fire bonus round of Choose or Lose Star Wars Edition. Okay, I'm going to ask a question, an either or. You give me an answer with no justification. Got it?
Got it.
Got it,
Okay.
Perry? All right.
Mm-hmm.
Favorite lightsaber duel in the original trilogy: Luke versus Vader in Cloud City, or Luke versus Vader in Death Star 2?
Cloud
Cloud
City.
City.
Oh,
Oh my gosh, so sweet. Cooler ship: Millennium Falcon or X-wing?
X-wing.
X-Wing.
Better one-liner: I am your father, or I know?
I'm your
I know.
father.
Which scene gives you chills first? Opening shot of the Star Destroyer over Tatooine, or the Emperor's first reveal?
Emperor reveal.
Yeah, I was about to say Emperor reveal.
More terrifying villain moment: Vader choking officers, or Palpatine electrifying Luke?
Palpatine electrifying Luke.
I would say Vader choking his own officers.
If you could visit one location, Hoth, Endor, or Tatooine?
None of the
Tatooine.
above.
Or I'll throw this in there,
Cloud, give me Cloud
or
City.
Cloud City.
Okay,
Give me,
Cloud City,
give me
man.
Cloud. You said three underdeveloped, crime-ridden slash crime-ridden worlds, or Cloud City. Give me Cloud City.
Best
Yeah,
best non-human sidekick: Chewie, R2D2, or Yoda?
R2D2.
I'm gonna say Chewie.
Okay. Death Star 1 or Death Star 2, which had the better design?
Probably the finished one.
I say two for other reasons.
All right, this one's going to be a quick gut answer. Most emotional moment of the trilogy?
Uh, I will say Mon Mothma talking to the entire Rebel Alliance, kind of getting them prepared to possibly die in this battle, and this is all in the name of hope. It's something that's not even solidified. It's something that's not necessarily, you know, it's like you're fighting for hope. You're not even your cause is hope. Hope can be diminished, it can be gone, but we're asking you to go fight this. It's honestly suicidal fight in the name of hope, and that's a powerful moment to me.
Hunter, what's your
I
answer?
think Mon Mothma is extremely underrated, but I'm like a huge nerd, man. Like I just go ahead.
No, Mon is great. I'm gonna say when Darth Vader strikes down Obi-Wan,
Okay, I
because
can see
yeah,
that as
the lack
well.
of the lack of context is crazy.
Last question. If you could steal one prop from the original trilogy set, what are you taking?
I'm running away with the lightsaber.
Whose lightsaber?
Luke's from Episode 6.
Can you say that again?
If you could
Luke's
steal
lightsaber. Oh,
one
sorry.
prop from the original trilogy set, what are you taking?
Ooh, one prop, any prop?
Any prop.
Uh, Akbar's head. Let me stop. Um, I would say a like a Y wing or X wing's pilot's helmet.
Okay, that'd be cool. So that ends that bonus round. One last topic I want to talk about before we wrap up. Well, actually, sort of two short ones. I want to talk about the legacy of the original trilogy. So, like, talking about the bigger picture, I'm just going to throw some stuff at you and then y'all just run with it. So, like, how did the original trilogy completely reshape Hollywood? Special effects, merchandising, blockbuster culture? Why do you think Star Wars has stayed relevant over so many generations, even compared to other films that came out at that time? And finally, do these three movies still stand alone as the best Star Wars has ever been, or has anything since then touched their legacy?
Okay. You want to go first, Hunter, or I go first? I guess.
I can go first.
Okay. Go.
Um, as far as a legacy, I don't think anything touches that trilogy. And I did say it last episode, but I will go on record and say that the prequels are my favorite trilogy. That doesn't mean that they're the best trilogy. It doesn't mean that they're the most culturally impactful. With meme culture, it could be debated. But yeah, I think that this trilogy stands the test of time, and I think what makes it so timeless is just the fact that it was the first of its kind, and they did it in a way that really helped it stand the test of time. A lot of the practical effects and the miniatures, and then even I think the score goes a long way in how iconic it's been, because you can look at a piece of media, you could look at a movie and think that it's a good movie, but when you add in the iconic score, it really helps tie in the I guess the iconicness of the trilogy. I can't really speak to what it did for Hollywood as a whole. I don't really have as much context there, but I do think that at least for the actors, it was a little bit of a drag for like Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher and all of them, because I do think that they were kind of associated with Star Wars for a long time. I know that's something that like Harrison Ford specifically had a real disdain for. And that's especially why he was frozen in Carbonite in episode 5, because we didn't know if he was going to be coming back for episode 6. Um, but the actors prevail. They all had pretty illustrious careers after that. Um, a lot of voice acting for Mark Hamill, and all of that. But I mean, it definitely stands the test of time, and just being the first trilogy to be so successful, I think that. I mean, obviously, in the year 2025, we have so much Star Wars media and so much to choose from. But I think even without any additional movies or video games or TV shows or comics or books, I still think that the original trilogy would be as impactful and culturally relevant today.
Uh, I agree. I agree to some extent. Um, I think the original trilogy is amazing, and it built it laid the groundwork for Star Wars, and you know, but you can't really ever really top that. But my personal opinion, I think Rogue One and Andor really showed how fearsome the Empire really is. It One thing that like a lot of the movies didn't really do was, especially the newer movies, was they never showed how fearsome and how great the Empire works, how competent the enemies are. I think your hero can only go so far if your enemy isn't great. And Rogue One and currently Andor, it shows how smart the Empire can be. It shows how what's the word? Competent the Empire is. And I always felt like that was like one thing, the one small thing that was like truly, truly missing from Star Wars. Not to say that they weren't competent, but you never really got to see it on the scale that Rogue One showed it. Like, for example, I'm gonna just talk about for a little bit. The final fight, the Rebels were winning for like maybe all of 5 minutes because it was a surprise attack. But once the surprise wore off, like you saw people getting picked off left, right, front, center, and it was looking bleak. And that's what like made like that last bit of Rogue One super emotional, because it was like these guys are really good and they're good at what they do, and they're willing to obliterate their own to keep their secrets. Um, the Andor, it shows how meticulous they can be. Like, and like the actress said it perfectly. Like the Empire is choking us slowly. They're doing it on purpose. They're not trying to be radical, but the way they go about things is so meticulous and so planned out. Like it was always hard for me to just not like Rogue One and not like Andor more than the original and even like the prequels, because it truly showed like I think it shows like the more realistic outcomes of what those battles would be. But I still love the originals more than everything else. But that's my little take. It might be hot, but hey.
So with that, let's do our final rankings and wrap up. Which film's your number one? No justification, or two-sentence justification if you really need it. But let's start with Hunter. What's your ranking for this trilogy?
It's going to be 5, 6, 4. If you know, you know, and that's all I'll say.
Why? I hate you, bro. I literally have the same thing. 5, 6, 4 for me. I am just genuinely surprised that he picks the same as me. He's like in my head. I swear. He's literally in my head. I was gonna try to say it first too, but you beat me to.
Let's say 5, 4, 6 would be mine.
Always got to go against the.
I
Always got to go
do.
against the.
I do. But say with that is our original trilogy deep dive. 3 movies, countless memories, and a cultural impact that's basically unmatched. If you like this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow Star Wars nerds in your life. And drop us a message with your favorite scene, your rankings, or your hot takes about Ewoks. We want to hear it all. Next up, we could be diving into the sequel trilogy by Disney. So we'll set some time aside to get that on the books to get that out to you. But either way, more Star Wars talk is on the way. Thanks for hanging out. Remember, the Force will be with you always. See you next time.